Welcome to another episode of Life Stories with Marty. I'm Marty here in Melbourne, Australia, and I've got a special guest, Irish author Rosita Sweetman. And she's going to join us from Dublin on her new book, Girl with a Fork in a World Full of Soup. So we're going to cross over, and then as my co-guest, my guest co-host, John Buckley McQuaid, also from Dublin. He's over in Denmark. So let's cross over and have a chat. One. Rosita, what a delight and an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be on your show.
Oh, it's a
Thank
delight.
you.
And we have our friend in Denmark, John, as I just said. Now we can see, I'm fascinated with your new book. I think it's absolutely Girl with a fork in a world full of soup. Now, I know people have seen this at the start of the intro, but before we go into all that and your other books, can I just start off because this is life stories? Tell us about your growing up, and if you can, the less we talk and dovetail into your with your family growing up and where you're from for people from all over the world, and let you carry on. I'll butt in every now and again. So it's over to you. See that.
Well, I was born in Dublin, in Ireland, into a big political, legal family. Um, there were nine of us in our family, and I was in the middle. Um, the beginning part of my life, my childhood, was really happy. My mum and dad there was never any money, but there was laughter, love, books, music, Connemara ponies. And then disaster struck when the sister younger than me died. She was just a few days short of her seventh birthday. And my mum went into the most profound depression. And there was no help then. In those days, there weren't counselors or there was just the local GP she'd say buzz off. Everyone was told to
And
buzz off.
Rosita, can I just go back a little
Yeah,
bit, just for listeners,
yeah, of
if you
course.
don't mind me asking? Um, what did your parents do for a living? You skipped over. You said financial, and um,
My
what did they
dad
actually
was a
do?
my dad was a barrister,
Yeah,
and then he became a judge. Um, but he had very poor health, like so many people in Ireland in the 40s and 50s. He had contracted TB, and so his health was always really fragile. Um, and he was terrible with money. Like there was never a penny in the house, but he was a wonderful dad, very loving and very creative.
and your
My
mother?
mum was looking after everyone.
Yeah,
Um, it was sort of hard because mum was as from a two-child family and had been brought up like her mother wouldn't let her go to the kitchen because young ladies didn't go to the kitchen. That was where the maids were. So and then mum, so she had her own horse. She had went on skiing holidays. Like she had a really privileged um childhood and adolescence, and then she's landed with nine children.
I have
So
a question.
yes,
How was your father bad with money? I mean, if he was a barrister and a judge, how do you mean he was bad with money?
mm.
um barristers aren't good with money. I don't think it comes with the territory. um Well, there
Uh,
wasn't much money, and he was never interested in money. I think to be good with money, you have to have a practical frame of mind and you have to be interested in it. And it never really interested him.
And
Um,
to just move on there to where we
yeah,
finished is your sister at the age of 7. Do you mind for my listeners? How did she pass? And my deepest respects, by the way.
Oh, thank you. She was born with a hole in the heart, and nowadays that can be cured. A female surgeon discovered how to operate on these tiny little blue babies, they were called, because the oxygen exchange wasn't
What was
happening.
her name?
Kathy,
Kathy. Okay. And
yeah.
what was the surgeon, you said there was a surgeon who discovered this operation. Uh,
Oh, I can't remember her
okay, it
name
doesn't
off the
matter.
top of my head,
Yeah, we
but
can Google it.
like
Yeah.
babies who are blue babies who are born blue babies now, it can be cured with surgery straight away. But with Kathy, there was nothing. Um, the doctors used to say to Mum, just keep her alive, we'll find a solution.
And
Um,
you're just talking about that, and obviously I've been privileged to get to talk to you a couple of times. That's me, the one buzzing all the time. But you said there with, I want to go in, if I can give you a dovetail, is ask, how did you feel when your sister passed, but also dovetailing into that you told me about your mom, how she went in to depression, if you don't mind, please.
well, my twin sister and I had been sent to boarding school the year before, um, and we were pulled out of the file at lunchtime and told, a nun just leaned down and said, your sister died this morning. We weren't
Oh,
brought, we weren't allowed home for the funeral. Um, Nobody came to visit. That was it. And then we went home and we were, well, certainly I was feeling completely alienated in boarding school. And then we went home and we were alienated at home because everybody at home was in total depression. Like it was as if
And Rosita,
everything had,
sorry
yeah,
to butt in, just
no,
for
no.
listeners, is why were you in boarding school?
Why?
Yes,
Well, it was sort of the upper class thing to do.
yeah,
You sent the children off to boarding school, and a relative of Mum's had died and left all his millions to the Catholic Church, the way people did then.
yeah.
And Mum wrote to the Archbishop. She was outraged about it. And next thing, one night there was a knock on the door, and a young priest just shoved an envelope into Mum's hand with £350 in it. And he was gone again. And that was, Mum said, oh, that'll send the twins to boarding school. That was from the Archbishop.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that was our fate sealed. But
Oh,
everyone was sent to boarding school then,
yeah.
and it was considered a great privilege.
Now,
I,
did
I
you have a good time at boarding school?
absolutely hated it.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly destructive emotionally. Like for a 9-year-old to be taken from your family,
Mm.
from your mum and dad, from your bedroom, from your dog, from your clothes, it was absolutely horrific. And you become, in order to survive it, you become another person.
you used the word
You build up a false
alienated.
self.
Yeah, you're
Sorry,
kind of masking your reality with that. You're
totally
trying to
mad. Yeah, totally mad.
Rosita,
that
you used the
sorry.
word alienated.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Would that define how you felt generally, and did that have an effect on you later?
it has had a profound effect. Yeah, because
Yeah,
I think like all the work R.D. Lang did, you become alienated from your real self.
yeah, yeah. So,
And,
so
and
your
that's
identity
a
changed in that you couldn't identify with your home any longer. Is that correct?
Yeah, you become sort of a stranger at home. Like I
Yeah,
know boarding schools are a bit different now, but we'd go in September and you wouldn't see home until Christmas,
yeah.
And
you know.
and and the thing is, you're saying about your mom, so we can go in a little bit about how did you said like she had depression and that, and I'm gonna dovetail as I said, but how did that obviously that affected the children and your father, but how did you see it as I let you explain that, especially after the death of your sister.
Um, I think as a child, you're very selfish. That's the way you're supposed to be. You're just interested in your survival. It was a long time before I really understood what Mum had been through. Um, we sort of blamed her and gave out about her. There wasn't an understanding, this is the worst thing that can happen to a mother, you know. So it took me a long time to really understand her and forgive her. But
And the forgiveness, where did the forgiveness come from?
it actually came very, very late because when my ex-husband went off with my sister, my eldest sister, and my whole family, including Mum, supported them, leaving me and two tiny children on our own with nothing. Like I had £69 and that was it.
And Rosalind, if I can just pop up there for our viewers,
Yeah.
the black and white photo, can you explain to them what they're looking at the moment? That I love this photograph and I want to ask you a question about it. So tell us how that came about. Who took that photograph?
That was a photographer with the Sunday Independent here.
Yeah.
And that was when my marriage was was breaking. Excuse me.
That's all right.
The marriage was in totally breaking down. But when I saw that photo, because I hadn't seen it for years, I couldn't believe how vulnerable I looked and the children looked. We're like people in a refugee camp or something, just that, like apart from the clothes, like we're all nicely dressed and everything, but just, I couldn't believe how vulnerable we were. And that's how vulnerable you are when you have small children.
And I'd say we've still got this photograph up here for me because I want people to study it a bit. I look at your face, and obviously you have the baby, but I look at your face. What were you thinking at that time? Because I've studied the photograph, and I wonder what was going on in your head at the time.
What I was thinking every day. Oh, excuse me.
You're okay.
How am I going to get through this? That was it from minute to minute. How am I going to survive? Not even the next 5 minutes, the next minute. We were in such peril. And yet there was nobody I could talk to. My husband, he was trying to get rid of us. My family were all supporting him. My mum was supporting him. I felt so unbelievably alone in the world.
I have a question. Why did they support your sister and him rather than you?
I don't know. That's how fucked up the family was.
Strange.
They still do. They still are in complete denial. They still say, "Oh, Rosita's mad. Nothing really happened." It's still denied, which is why I wrote the book, really, because like I've tried to write the story for years and years, but I wrote it to try and recapture my truth, because I think it's one of the biggest aspects of abuse is the abusers own the truth.
I was about to say that, you. That fascinated me, that line that you sent me, and that is the abuser owns your story when actually they don't. And that's why it's lovely talking about this. And give me a little bit more about what was it like when you were married? What was the relationship like?
Well, I came out of convent school, green as a cabbage. You know, like the Irish Times was considered too racy for us to have. With no sex education, no tools for how to deal in a relationship, how to relate to a man, how to protect yourself. Absolutely nothing. So we were like lambs to the slaughter, um, you know, and the only thing we were interested in was romance and the white knight coming along
And your
on his
husband was a lot
charger.
older than you, wasn't he?
He was older, he was married, he'd traveled the world. He yeah, he's only 11 years older, but
Yeah.
40 years in terms of life experience.
What was his profession?
He he's a development economist, which means going into developing countries and telling them how to do things. Nonsense, really, but
Yeah,
very
I
well
was
paid.
going to say, they're coming home telling you what to do, tell them what to do back.
Yeah.
But listen, just going into it, as I said, is you called him, you met Prince Charming. And if I can dovetail him, because earlier in your career, you were a research assistant and then became a well respected journalist, which you've done with RTE, and you're journalist for the Irish Press, the Irish Times, and so on. What was that like, and what stories fascinated you?
Um, it was an incredibly exciting time in Ireland, like the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah,
It was a very political time. Everyone was out in the street protesting, you know, protesting civil rights, protesting rights for gay people. Um, and then Maureen de Burke, who was one of the most political people, she founded the Irish Women's Liberation Movement.
mm,
And there were 12 of us. I was one of them who were the original founding members. And all of us were in journalism. So Mary Kenny said we used to go out and make the news, then we'd come home and write about it. Um, but it was a really exciting time. You felt if you went out and protested that things would change.
yeah,
You know, it's not like now where there are hundreds of thousands of people all over the world, say, protesting Palestine, but there's no sense that there's despair because people feel they can't make a change. Whereas in the 70s, you felt you could make a
mm,
change.
yeah.
So it was a very exciting time to be writing, to be involved in the media.
Okay, so what was your best story that excited you?
Um, there was one going into Marlborough House, which was a detention centre for young offenders. Um, and it was as brutal as every other institution in Ireland at the time for all working class kids. You know, they weren't middle class children who were in these institutions. But the warden for Marlborough House said he became a whistleblower and contacted us in the Irish Press. And he invited me to come in, like it was all clandestine, but we actually got it closed down. Um,
Oh,
but that in the women's movement, we were kind of the first to really challenge the power of the Catholic Church and this dictatorship that said, you know, kids, working class kids should be sent away, you know, they should be hammered, they should be this, that, um, you know, the mother and baby homes, all of that. We were really the first to challenge the Catholic Church. And that was incredibly exciting.
It would have
Um,
been. It was a big achievement to even get that far. To
it
be,
was great fun shouting at them, you know,
yeah, yeah,
these
that's
sacred cows, give their pedestal a good rattle.
Now, let me ask you a question before I want to move on to your book and about
Yeah.
your other books. But what drives you to do what you do, and how do you, for people listen, what do you reflect on, or what lessons would you offer to anyone listening to this episode?
My daughter says I'm obsessed with the truth. And I think there is truth in that. To Yeah, like in journalism, in writing, um, I'm always sort of trying to find out what's really going on. I think maybe it's partly being in a big family and being in the middle. The older ones always seem to have the truth and they'd never tell you, and that
Mm.
was so frustrating. So maybe that's part of it.
Would it
Um,
be that you don't care what the truth is, you just want to see the truth? You know,
um,
with the way things are today, everything is spin, and the kind of the philosophy of, look, I don't care what it is, just tell me what's going on. I'll deal with it.
Absolutely.
Then I can
Yeah.
deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
One other question. Um,
I
would you
think the
say
truth
that you
is
wrote,
sacred.
would you say that you wrote the book for the woman with the two children in that picture?
Oh, probably. Yeah.
Or what would you say to that girl, woman now?
Um, be careful. There are such bad forces around you. Be really, really careful.
And I'm going to go into like the girl, the fork, with a fork in a world full of soup. What did you come up with the name? It's flashing up here as we're talking. The front, and I must say to you, I love the cover.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
absolutely fantastic, and even the back cover, the explanation of it is, it draws you into the book. So I compliment you. But tell us, where did you come up with that, and why did you want to write it?
Um, it's actually Noel Gallagher said it about Liam Gallagher, the Oasis, the
Yeah.
two Gallagher brothers. And he said when they were really fighting and Liam was being impossible, and he said, "Oh, Liam, he's like a boy with a fork in a world of soup." And I just thought, my God, that is so fantastic. Apparently, it's also an old saying, but I haven't been able to track it down. But I
No,
now,
I just think it's fantastic. And then who did the graphics at the front of it as it's flashing up here again? I love it.
that was my wonderful publisher, Morris Sweeney.
Yeah.
Um, Morris is 80 and I'm 77, and there's just the two of us. There's no PAs or publicity department, or there's just the two of us doing everything. So Morris did the cover. Yeah, I really liked it as well.
It's beautiful. And 77, I'm not, I've got three ex-wives and five kids. I'm not trying to chat you up, but you certainly don't look 77. So
Oh,
with this book that comes out,
yeah.
what's your next step? What's your passion? And also, if I may chuck in, and I want to chuck up a picture here, is that you sent me with, I think it's your daughter, protesting at a protest. Can you
Oh,
explain that one for me? It's flashing up here now.
that was with my daughter and her daughter. So it was three generations of us
Yes.
going off to protest when the Irish government, and it's only 3 years ago,
Mm.
were gifting, and they went ahead and gifted it, even though there were huge protests, the National Maternity Hospital to the nuns. And you think in Ireland, where there's been such abuse of women and babies, criminal abuse in the mother and baby homes, that for the government in the 21st century to give this huge hospital, the maternity hospital, to the nuns, but they went ahead and did it. So that's what we were protesting. Get your
Wasn't there a thing
rosaries
where
off my ovaries.
wasn't there a thing where they said that that maternity hospital had to be run by Catholic ethos? And if they didn't run it by Catholic ethos, then they had to start paying rent. They
Oh,
gave it
there's
to them they charged them a nominal rent, but they said if
yeah.
it doesn't run after Catholic ethos, then yeah.
You suddenly see, the so many of the politicians here are so tied up still with the church, even though there have been huge strides in
Mm.
separating church and state. So
But
many
isn't
of
it all
them.
cosmetic? Isn't it all cosmetic?
Um, I wouldn't say it's totally cosmetic. Like,
Mm.
I think the younger generation have really stepped away. Like most people going to church now, it's older people. Like the young people still send their kids to Catholic schools, but that's often because there isn't an alternative.
But don't you
You go
still have
outside
to
Dublin.
if you have an unwanted pregnancy, don't you still have to go to England to take care of it?
No, no, because we've got abortion now
I understand
legalized.
that, but one thing is on paper you've got an abortion, but in practice, do you actually have an abortion? Is there anywhere you can actually get an abortion in Ireland?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Like
you
interesting.
couldn't, but you can now. But was just
yeah.
going back to your story? Is I'm fascinated. I've got a list of questions, but I can't really bring myself because I want to know. We've covered the women. So as I just alluded to, there is what's next for you? What do you want to achieve? I drifted off saying about you. I'm sure you're very proud of your children standing up. And as I asked earlier, if you can dovetail in, is I asked you about the best stories you've done. What was the most heartfelt as a journalist story that you either had to cover or write about it?
Um, I think it's always stories to do with justice. They're the ones that really come from the heart. Like yesterday was Pride. Sorry, the day before was Pride in Ireland.
Yep.
And an awful lot of people have no idea that the first Pride March in Ireland was 1983 because a young guy, beautiful looking young man, had been bashed to death in Fairview Park because these young lads had formed a sort of vigilante group and they'd go out queer bashing
Mm.
and they got him and bashed him to death. But worse than that, and they were all in the defence forces, when they came up for up in court, they got 2 years suspended sentences because the judge said you couldn't call something like that a murder. And I was like, what? Like David Norris said, it was basically a license to kill. And that was when the first Pride March took place, hugely supported by the women's movement. But it just to remember that human rights are fought for and are born in struggle and rage against injustice. Usually, they don't come with sort of fluffy tea parties. They come with struggle and rage against injustice.
Would you concur with me that you said there defense forces? It's that would be in a lot of stuff because I know a bit about that. Is
Yeah,
it goes kind of all walks of life, doesn't it? But in particular, I don't know. I think I'm going into a kind of a moral injury thing is where they're let down superiors and they almost fall into line and abuse the other abusers, which your words
yeah,
when you said that, and I think this is probably the best words I've ever heard when you said about the abuser, you know, he makes it, I'm surmising now, makes it his story. If you'd like to just elaborate a bit on that, because that's very for our listeners, that and especially for women to be empowered them. So can I let you run with that, please?
Um, I think it's a huge part of abuse. There's, first of all, the abuse takes place, and abuse is like the shattering of your consciousness. It's the shattering of your bodily integrity, and then the shattering of your psychological integrity. And a huge part of the abuse is then the abuser owns that story. um, these little boys who are abused in Catholic schools. And for years and years and years, they told, oh, no, nothing really happened. It wasn't that bad. Why do you always make such a fuss? And it's only when the abused person can take the story back, wrench it back, and say, no, this is what actually happened. This is how it affected me. This is how I felt. This is my truth. And then you stand separate from the abuser. And it's as if taking your story back is a shield, it protects you. Because the terrifying thing is, so many people who've been abused go on to kill themselves. Like, and one of the ways, this shite about forgiveness, I can't bear it. It's like another nail in the coffin of people who've been abused. You don't have any obligation to forgive people who've abused you. Your only obligation is to protect yourself and protect the people you love, your children, because you are really vulnerable. Like countless people who've been abused go on to kill themselves
And,
because
and
the
and not
shame
only
becomes
that,
so.
what you're saying is you're saying like, would you find that just picking out what you're saying there is the people keep silence about it. They feel ashamed, even though they're the actual
Totally.
the one that's getting abused. They feel shame. They keep silent. They hide it, and some go into which was, I'm part of moral injury, and that's the symptoms.
Yeah,
They blame themselves, and they carry that. It's only until they realize it was not your fault.
100%, absolutely. Yeah, and there's so little education on that. Instead of being told, "Oh, forgive, forgive," no, absolute bullshit. I don't go down that path at
Yeah,
all. Like,
yeah.
it was pressed on me for years, and then you feel doubly bad. Not only was I abused, now I'm a terrible person. I can't forgive. I don't think abused people should ever, like, if at some point you get to a stage where you say, yeah, okay, I forgive, that's fine. But your real duty is to protect yourself because you've been broken. That's your duty. It's not to it's not to forgive the other person. And just to say on shame, I think shame is the most toxic part of abuse.
Mhm.
And it's weird, it's so unfair. Like, not only have you been shattered, but you feel ashamed about it. But everybody
It's like a double whammy, isn't it?
it's it's so unfair,
Yeah.
but it's absolutely there. We were talking about the other day about Giselle Pellicot, the French woman whose
Yeah.
husband let her be raped by 200 men, we call them men. Um, and when she said no, she was going to go public, which meant they all had to be public and they all had to be named, which is an incredibly brave thing of her to do. And she said, shame must change sides. And I thought that was the most powerful statement. And
That's
it should be everywhere. Like, how has it not been said up to now? But that's, yeah,
and I think what you're saying is, and I use this word quite a lot on the moral injury that, but it's like from it doesn't matter where it's from, but there was no duty of care
not, no,
to the people, and especially what you're talking about, like Well, what you went through, what you did, and look, we could go into it for hours, but there was no duty of care to you. And that's what happens. And that kind of, like I'm talking about, even duty of care is you have a parent you look up to and let you down. That's a
Yeah,
lack of duty of care or within a business.
totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's not even there should be a government department called the duty of care. You know,
Yes.
it
Yep.
should be seen as a primary part of human life and human education. But it's not, instead, like people who have been abused, after a bit, everyone says, could you not shut up about that? Like it's over. It's over a long time. Like you and that's understandable. People get fed up with somebody who's moaning all the time, but you have to somehow keep your belief in yourself and not let the shame overwhelm you.
Not
I
let the
think,
shame overwhelm you, but also by speaking out like you're doing tonight and other people have done is it's educational because let them know the next generation they may suffer it. I mean, I know things were bad, but also letting companies and governments know whatever department, what's police force, the medical, the nurses, the doctors, whatever is known, there must be a duty of care and there must be consequences from the duty of care without doing the duty of care.
uh, absolutely, absolutely. There's a wonderful young woman, like going back to the Defence Forces again. She was savagely beaten by a young soldier, and she was she stood up. I think the younger women are so great, like they have their rage and they don't you dare do that. But it was when the judge again gave him a suspended sentence and said, oh, sure, his career in the army will be destroyed if we send him to prison. And she came out of the court like a tigress, and the whole, well, hundreds of women around the country and men supported her. And she got a
You said
retrial.
I actually know that story, and also you would probably know this is the Women of Honor, which they've been on the
Yeah,
podcast. The way those girls were able to speak up, but yet they all loved their job within the defense forces,
yeah,
and
yeah,
yet and sexual abuse was accepted as in it was a blind eye. It was kind of a fella's going, oh, good on you, buddy.
yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
you're 100% what you're saying, but if people need to speak out for the next generation. Don't
absolutely.
tolerate it.
Yeah, yeah. I think
there's a
that's
thing.
what was wonderful with
th-
Me Too, the Me Too movement, that the younger women just said, no way,
Yeah.
and that it drew a line, and then other women poured into the discussion. But it's drawing a line and saying, okay, now we've had enough.
Yes.
There's a
And
thing.
if they
There's
don't
no. There's
speak
an
up,
extra point
they have
here.
to. Sorry,
There's an
John. If they don't speak up, as I'm going back to, it's education. You've got to tell the younger family. I tell my kids, I've got girls and a boy, I tell them to make sure, speak out, even in the workplace. If you think
Absolutely.
someone's doing something, you must speak out. Women are not objects. They're people, and they go. And I put it like this: I've said this on many podcasts, and I've got three ex-wives and girls. Women are smarter than men.
You
Okay.
said it.
I knew you'd smile at that one. Sorry, John, I interrupted you. Jump in,
what
John.
what I was going to say was this. You said and men, Rosita.
Yeah,
I think that part of the next development stage would be to activate men to come forward, not so much about abuse for them, but other men abusing women and saying this is not on, where men support women. Not, oh, you poor little thing. No, no. where they say this is wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's missing. There was a guy who wrote. He was he's a journalist with the Irish Times, Derek Scally in Berlin, and he
Yeah.
wrote a book about the Catholic Church. The best Catholics in the world, I think it was called. And he wrote about, but where are the men? The ones who abused through the years, the Magdalene Laundries, etc., mother and baby hymns.
Yeah.
Where are the men? And
Yeah.
he appealed to men to write into him, and talk about this.
Yeah.
He heard from none. I'm the only man he heard from because I sent him the lyrics of Girls Who Lived in Hell.
Wow. Yeah.
And that
But
was interesting.
now,
So where
guys,
are the men?
we've got 5 minutes left on the show,
Okay.
and I want your first of all, we're going to bring up with your book. It comes up there as we're talking, and love it. What advice would you give to not just you're talking about like domestic abuse or relationships? What advice would you give to the younger people, as we were alluding to there, and people that journalists, young journalists, and education in colleges? What advice would you give them?
Most of the young women I know, and the young guys, like I have a young son as well, um, they're so switched on, like they don't really need my advice. They're so far ahead. They've absorbed feminism, they've absorbed human rights. Like, I think the young people are wonderful. It's the old white-haired men in the world are really fucking things up at the moment.
Yes.
But I think the biggest thing is trust your gut. We're animals at heart in the most beautiful way. Trust your feelings, trust your instincts. Don't let anyone bullshit you, whether it's a billionaire or a good looking guy or a good looking woman. It's like trust your gut and your instinct. That'll bring you forward in a good way.
Okay, so we're going to finish off. So, what's next on the horizon after people read The Girl with a Fork in a World Full of Soup? What is the next project that you're working on?
I have to say, I have no idea.
Well, there's an honest answer. Listen, it's been an absolute look. It's a pleasure. I could go on for 5 hours with you, and it's just a pleasure to have you on. And thank you so much. And hope to have
thank
you
you.
back. It's lovely talking to you, and thank you for the time before the show you spent. And we'll stay in touch.
Brilliant, Marty. Thank you so much. You're the
It's
best.
my pleasure. And John, my friend, thank you so much for being on. And to my
Pleasure to be
audience
here.
here in Australia and all over the world, thank you so much. And you can see this podcast on Moral Injury International Life Stories. And we'll see you on the next episode. Cheerio.
Peace.